Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of A Comprehensive History of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Starting the year would be the release of a trio of cards people thought we'd never get. Yellow Gadget, Red Gadget and Green Gadget. These cards were released as part of the Machine Refault structure deck, a structure deck that was actually designed around Ancient Gears. Ancient Gears themselves weren't a bad archetype, but the gadgets were a step above any other machine out there. Their ability to gain card advantage by adding a gadget to your hand every time you summoned one of them made them an absolute beast when combined with Ultimate Offering. While machines wouldn't be the top deck of the format, their availability as a structure made them very popular. The year was already off to an excellent start in terms of card releases, but Konami just had to go one step further, with the release of Crush Card Fires as a Shonen Jump Championship prize card. Tribute 1 Dark Monster with 1000 or less attack, check all monsters on your opponent's side of the field, your opponent's hand, and all cards they draw until the end of your opponent's third turn after this card's activation, and destroy all monsters with 1500 or more attack. Dread it, run from it, it was only a matter of time before this card hit the game. While not quite on the level of Crush Card, Magical Stone Excavation would release not long after in Champion Pack Game 2. Discard 2 cards, add 1 spell card from your graveyard to your hand. That might sound like a fairly average effect, but this card would see play very quickly in a devastating combo deck. Speaking of combo decks, the release of Duelist Pack Jaden Yuki 2 and Duelist Pack Asta Felix would go a long way to pushing the combo meta. Burial from a Different Dimension, Destiny Hero Malicious, Card Trooper, and Destiny Draw would all play parts in providing engines for their respective decks. Burial, with its ability to return 3 of your removed from play monsters back to the graveyard, meant you could continue to use their grave effects. Something that would be very handy in decks that relied on the graveyard, such as zombies. Destiny Hero Malicious alongside Destiny Draw would help push the Destiny Hero engine, one of the fastest deck engines of its time. Finally, Card Trooper would become the basis of a brand new machine deck. Allow me to introduce you to Troop, Dupe, Scoop. Here's how this deck works. First, you summon Card Trooper. Card Trooper is a level 3 Earth Attribute machine monster with 400 attack and 400 defense, and its effect reads, once per turn, you can send up to 3 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard. This card gains 500 attack for each card sent to the graveyard this way until the end of the turn. When this card on your side of the field is destroyed and sent to your graveyard, draw 1 card. So this card did 3 things. It set up your graveyard for combos, it became a 1900 attack beat stick, and it floated into a draw on destruction. So far so good. But that's not all there was to Card Trooper. With its low attack, it was a fireable target for Machine Duplication. Select 1 machine type monster with 500 or less attack on your side of the field. You can special summon up to 2 additional copies of that card from your deck. That's a pretty good payoff, but we can go one step further. Activating limiter removal would turn your Card Troopers into 3800 attack beat sticks, leading to a grand total of 11,400 points of damage. Should your Card Troopers somehow fail to win that turn, you still get to draw 3 cards when they're destroyed by the effect of limiter removal. Overall, the damage output and card advantage was just too good. If you were unlucky enough to be on the receiving end of this combo with no way to stop it, all you could really do was simply scoop. So with its insane card advantage and OTK ability, you'd think Troop Dupe Scoop would be the deck to beat that format, right? Well, not quite. February would also see a new subscription bonus for the US edition of Shonen Jump. Elemental Hero Stratos is a wind attribute level 4 warrior monster, and when this card is normal or special summoned, you can select and activate one of 2 effects. Destroy spell or trap cards on the field up to the number of hero monsters you control. Alternatively, select and add 1 hero monster from your deck to your hand. The card would be legal for Shonen Jump St. Louis on February 24th. I could show you the results of this tournament, but instead, here's a replay of myself and a friend playing Airblade Turbo vs Troop Dupe Scoop. Enjoy. Whew, wasn't that something? As you can see, Airblade Turbo was easily the best deck of the format, tier 0 even. It makes one wonder how the game was going to cope from here. Thankfully we didn't have to wonder long, as just a week later we would see the release of the March 2007 Forbidden Unlimited list. The impact of Airblade Turbo on the ban list would be immediate. Graceful Charity would be forbidden, while Giant Trunade, Dimension Fusion, and Elemental Hero Stratos would all be put to 1. These changes completely killed some of the deck's combos and forced players to slow down. Other changes to the list would include the bannings of Magician of Faith, Breaker the Magical Warrior, and Last Will. Victory Dragon would also be forbidden, not because it was strong, but because it was a ruling's nightmare. Victory Dragon had the effect where, if it was to attack your opponent directly and reduce their life points to 0, you would win the match. Not the duel, the match. That's right, Victory Dragon would win you the entire best of 3. There's just one problem. Your opponent can just forfeit at any time. So if you're in a position where you can attack directly with Victory Dragon to win the match, your opponent can just scoop it up and say we're going to game 2. As you can imagine, this caused a lot of rulings disputes. The Victory Dragon player would feel entitled to the match, while the other player would argue that they had the right to forfeit and move on to the next game. In the end, it was just better to ban it. In Limited, we would see Snatch Steel taken off the naughty step, while Neo-Spacian Grandmaw was also put to 1 for its ability to out just about any monster in the game. Chain Strike was put to 1 when it became apparent that this card could easily take over 2,000 life points off your opponent in one go. Overload Fusion was put to 1 for many of the same reasons as Dimension Fusion, namely OTKs. Mind Crush was put to 1 thanks to its old ruling where you were allowed to look at your opponent's hand with it. And Crush Card was put to Limited because of course it was. It was simply too new to ban, especially as it didn't have wide distribution yet. DD Assailant would go the semi-limited thanks to its utility as a removal card. Mask of Darkness would be joining it as it was basically a weaker version of the already powerful Magician of Faith. With the meta having moved away from fusion monsters, Metamorphosis would be allowed to go from 1 to 2. Finally, we would see Injection Fairy Lily, Sacred Felix of Nephis, Exiled Force, and Upstock Goblin come off the list altogether, as they had simply fallen out of favour. With OTK strategies being neutered, it was now time for a new meta, and there was no better place to start than with the release of Strike of Neos on February 28, 2007. Strike of Neos would see archetype support with the release of new Dark World monsters and the debut of the 6 Samurai. For its time, this was an absolutely crazy good set. So good that there's just too many cards for this one page. The previously mentioned Grandmaw makes an appearance here, and it was apparent on release that this card couldn't be allowed at free. Great Shogun Shien would take lead as the boss monster of the 6 Samurai, thanks to its ability to lock your opponent to only one back row return. Combine this with the archetype's ability to have your monsters substitute themselves for another's destruction, and you had a very hard to get rid of card. Although designed to support for its archetype, Dark World Dealing's ability to draw one card and then discard one card would see it get used in all sorts of decks. Ancient Rules was Konami's cute little method to get people to cheat out their Blue Eyes White Dragons and Dark Magicians, 2 cards which at this point were still popular, but pretty unplayable in a duel. Strike of Neos would see no shortage of side deck cards either. Pulling the Rug would be a popular counter to the Tribute Summon focused Monarch decks. The effect of the Transmigration Prophecy to return cards from the graveyard to the deck would see some niche use over the years. And finally, DD Crow remains one of the best hand traps in the game, thanks to its ability to banish one card from your opponent's graveyard. That effect may sound a little bit simple, but as we've learnt time and time again, some of the best abilities in the game are the simple ones. Moving into March, we would see the release of Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2007 for the Nintendo DS. This game would be the first in its series to release on a system other than the Game Boy Advance. More significant, however, was the promo cards that came with it. Spell Striker allowed you to special summon it from your hand by banishing one spell card from your graveyard. But better yet was Destiny Hero Disc Commander, who allowed you to draw 2 cards when it was special summoned from the graveyard. Considering Destiny Heroes were already one of the strongest draw engines in the game, the release of Disc Commander was just too good to be true. On May 16th we would see the release of what would be the last mainline set before the World Championships in July. Force of the Breaker wouldn't quite be on the level of Strike of Neos, but still had plenty to bring to the game. Raiza the Storm Monarch would be a huge boost to what was already a powerful deck in the format. Force of the Breaker would see the introduction of field-searching monsters such as Gravekeeper's Commandant and Harpy Queen, two cards that would search Necrophaly and Harpy's Hunting Ground respectively. A common theme in 2007 seemed to be the effectiveness of monsters that you could use from your hand. This theme would continue with the release of the Volcanics archetype. This unique archetype would bring a completely new style of play to Yu-Gi-Oh! Your main strategy wasn't so much to attack your opponent with your monsters on the field, but to use those monsters as ammunition for your Blaze Accelerator spell and trap cards. These card combinations would see the deck act as an artillery strike of sorts, as it blew up everything your opponent had until there was nothing left. Not to be completely overshadowed by the Volcanics was the release of the Crystal Beast monsters as well. Like Volcanics, this archetype would also have a unique style of play, as monsters who are destroyed would go to the spell and trap zone instead of the graveyard. While not as competitively solid as the other archetypes from this time, Crystal Beast would still go on to have a huge fan following. The final cards I want to talk about are Field Barrier, a card that will be very familiar to anyone who's played a Mystic Mind deck in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Tribute one dark monster with 2000 or more attack, and choose spell cards or trap cards. Check all spell and trap cards on your opponent's side of the field, in your opponent's hand, and all cards your opponent draws until the end of the third turn after this card's activation. Destroy all cards of the chosen type. While not as devastating or easily abusable as Crush Card, EEV was still a force to be reckoned with should it be used on you. Now that we have all the pre-world set releases out the way, let's take a look at how the metagame was doing as the Shonen Jump Championships were in full swing. 2007 would be the year of the Monarchs. Thestalos the Firestorm Monarch, Raiza the Storm Monarch, Zaborg the Thunder Monarch, and Mobius the Frost Monarch. These four monsters would be a common sight throughout the year. Sorry Grandmog, you're just not quite good enough. The run-up to Worlds would see Monarchs go on an absolute tear, as they were among some of the most represented decks in the meta. In April we would see Cesar Gonzalez take Shonen Jump Montreal with what was a very aggressive Monarch build. Playsets of Cyber Dragon, Dekuchi, Gravekeeper's Spy, and Brain Control would give Gonzalez all the resources he needed to play his 8 main deck Monarchs. With Monarchs having gained a reputation as a control deck, seeing such an aggressive variant must have caught a lot of people off guard. Monarchs would continue the top, as Jesse Samek took Shonen Jump Philadelphia with his Destiny Hero Monarch hybrid deck. With this deck, it's like Samek took the entire metagame and just combined it into one package. First place decks are all well and good, but they don't always tell the full story of the metagame. In the case of Monarchs, however, they were the real deal, taking 7 out of the top 8 spots at Philadelphia. Despite the dominance of Monarch decks, we would still see some resistance throughout the year. June would see Shonen Jump Minneapolis taken by Sean Scurry's Destiny Hero Beatdown build. Devoid of Monarchs, this build would see a return of the out-of-favour Dark Magician of Chaos, Jinzo, and Metamorphosis. Add one copy of the elusive Crush Card Virus to the mix, and you had a deck designed to halt the rampage of the Monarchs. Monarchs would strike back, however, as Adam Korn took the US Nationals with his Trooper Monarch build. As a side note to the US Nationals, I just want to quickly talk about what is one of the coolest decks I've ever seen. This is Aggro Burn, made by Justin Romack. Instead of opting for Aggro or Stall Burn, which was common at the time, Romack chose both, going for a deck which aimed to end games as quickly as possible. Romack was able to get away with this thanks in part to a metagame where players were firing card advantage over life points. Adding to the deck's utility was the side, which allowed Romack to modify it into a Monarch build. This deck would heavily confuse opponents, and it was difficult to side for. Romack's efforts would ultimately pay off as a top 4 finish saw him qualify for Worlds. If you want to know more about this cool deck, go see Mega Capital G's video on it. Before we get to the World Championships, I just want to make a little side note about the Shonen Jump bonus card, Green Baboon, Defender of the Forest. When a beast monster you control is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 1000 life points to special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. On paper, this was a half decent self-recycling beat stick, but in reality it would become the basis for an infamous deck known as Baboon Burn. July 28th would see the 2007 Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship take place in San Diego. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any official Konami documentary footage to leech off, so instead, here's a figure of the finals.
He's trying to figure out game. Scores 3,700 for Mattia.
Much like the Shonen Jump Championship events before it, the 2007 World Championships was a Monarch format. The tournament would be run by Chilean Monarch player Andreas Toro. Andreas would run triple Raiza and triple Thestalos to give him full control of the field and hand. Cyber Dragon, Gravekeeper's Spy, and Treeborn Frog would be coming in once again as the tribute fodder, while Card Trooper and Dekochi would burn through the deck. Brain Control, Snatch Steal, and Soul Exchange gave extra control of the opponent's field. The side deck would see double Mobius utilised for back row removal, as well as triple Hydrogeddon for aggressive field swarming. The side would also see a cameo by Banisher of the Radiance, who was used to punish players who banned Card Trooper and Treeborn Frog. Finally, we would see Pulling the Rug sided for the mirror match. Overall, the level of control this deck had over the game was outrageous, as Andreas had access to cards on both sides of the field. Italy's Mattia Sarpa would be taking second with his Machine Monarch hybrid. This was a far more aggressive variant of Monarchs, as Sarpa was looking to swarm the field with Hydrogeddons and Card Troopers as quickly as possible. Cyber Felix would play a key role in protecting the Card Troopers, Cyber Dragons and Jinzo. Unique to this deck from the builds we've seen so far is the inclusion of Triple Trap Dust Shoot in the main deck. This card is normally seen in the side or with the occasional main deck cameo, but up 3 was almost unheard of. In the side we would see a conversion kit for a burn deck, as the likes of Snipe Hunter, Descarala and Wave Motion Cannon helped push that strategy. System Down was played to counter other machine decks, and we would see Trista and Dust Tornado used over the likes of Mobius for back row removal. Pulling the Rug would once again make an appearance as a Monarch counter, and Snipe Hunter was a nice tech inclusion for outing problem cards. Third place would see an appearance by US National Champion Adam Korn, who would be running an anti-meta Stallburn deck. It'd be a defensive deck designed to lock down the likes of Monarchs and Card Trooper with cards such as Gravekeeper's Spy, Spirit Reaper, Messenger of Peace, Level Limit Area A, Swords of Revealing Light, Solemn Judgment, Pulling the Rug, and Magic Cylinder all in the main deck. 2 copies of Mask of Darkness would see these traps recycled regularly. Wave Motion Cannon would top it all off by acting as baits for the opponent's back row removal cards. In a matchup against this deck, you'd be forced to make a choice. Do you get rid of the Wave Motion Cannon now? Or do you attempt to go after the other back row cards and hope to end the game quickly? In the side, we'd see the reverse of Sarpa's strategy as Korn converted his deck into a Monarch build. Compared to previous World Championship decks, this was very intuitive anti-meta deck building. Real impressive stuff. The World Championships were over and it was once again time for a new season of cards. Releasing on August 15th, 2007, Tactical Evolution would be just that, as it contained many cards that would come to shape present and future metas. Zombie Master and Illblood would be immediate staples in zombie decks, while Elemental Hero Neos Alias and Hero Counterattack would be deceptively good additions to the archetype. Necro Gardener would be one to watch in the future thanks to its attack negation effect, and Double Summon was a gadget player's dream. It was a set with much potential also, thanks to the likes of Broken Bamboo Sword, Snake Rain, and Summoner's Art. We can't go on without mentioning Rainbow Dragon either. August would also see the introduction of a new Shonen Jump prize card. Crush Card Virus was out, Gold Sarcophagus was in. While not as broken as Crush Card, Gold Sarcophagus was still extremely powerful thanks to its ability to search any card from your deck. Also appearing in August was the Comic Con pre-release of Premium Pack, containing the ever-annoying Marshmallow. The September 2007 Forbidden Unlimited list would see the unsurprising but rather large shake-up to the metagame. Metamorphosis and Confiscation would be banned for good, while also being joined in Forbidden by Ring of Destruction and Snatch Steal. Limited would see the return of Breaker the Magical Warrior and the Magician of Faith, while Card Trooper, Destiny Hero Disc Commander, Marshmallow, Snipe Hunter, Brain Control, Fishshore, Gold Sarcophagus, Megamorph, Smashing Ground, the Transmigration Prophecy, Trap Dust Shoot, and War of the Feeling Light would all go to 1. Semi-limited would see Slap on the Wrists for the Gadgets, Destiny Hero Malicious, Royal Decree, and Pot of Avarice, whilst Jinzo and Nobleman of Crossout moved out of limited. Unlimited would see DD Assailant, Protector of the Sanctuary, Good Goblin Housekeeping, and Deck Devastation Virus let off the list altogether. There would not be another main set pack release until November, but that didn't stop Konami giving players plenty of new cards to look forward to. September would see the trap card Dark Bribe included in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Tag Force 2. This counter card allowed you to negate any spell or trap at the trade-off of giving your opponent an extra draw. In October we would see the release of the Rise of the Dragon Lord structure deck. The deck itself wouldn't make any major waves, but it did include the likes of Malevolent Catastrophe, Trade-In, and the ever so powerful Foolish Burial. November would see the TCG introduction of one of the most important boss monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, as players were finally able to get their hands on Light and Darkness Dragon. Light and Darkness Dragon, or LADD, is a level 8 dragon monster with 2800 attack and 2400 defense, and an effect that reads, this card cannot be special summoned. While this card is face up on the field, its attribute is also treated as dark. When a spell or trap card is activated, or the effect of an effect monster is activated, that activation is negated, and this card loses 500 attack and defense. When this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, select one monster in your graveyard, then destroy all cards you control, special summon that monster. This card was good, damn good, an on-field Omni-Negate that could be activated multiple times per turn. By 2007 standards, that was an incredible card effect. The option to special summon a monster from your graveyard and attempt a comeback play was just icing on the cake. To the surprise of no one, Light and Darkness Dragon would see competitive play immediately, as it was perfectly suited to the Tribute Summon heavy Monarch meta. November would see the year's pack releases end on a high, as Gladiators Assault would bring many new powerful cards to the game. The newly released Gladiator Beast archetype would soon be a huge deal, as the likes of Bestiari, Heraklinos, and Test-Tiger would become common sights at tournaments. Six Samurais would also receive additional support and become an incredibly solid deck, thanks to the inclusion of cards such as Enshi, Shen's Chancellor, with its ability to special summon itself and pop monsters on the field. The likes of Necroface, Soul Taker, Dragon Ice, and the Imprisoning Mirrors would be among the set's many useful technical cards. Gladiators Assault would also be fondly remembered for its Rainbow Dragon Chaos Neos Ghost Rare misprint, a card which has become something of a favourite among collectors. Set releases might have been over for the year, but card releases weren't, as we saw the double whammy of World Championship 2008 and Tag Force Evolution for Nintendo DS and PlayStation 2 respectively. Included in World Championship was Dimensional Prison, a card which straight up power crept Sakuretsu armor, as it removed monsters from play instead of destroying them. Tag Force Evolution would include the monster Nurse Reficule, the Fallen One, whose effect would turn recovery damage into burn damage, something which would later form the basis of the powerful Nurse Burn deck. These cards would come a little too late for the 2007 metagame. The staggered international release didn't help either. Regardless, the show had to go on as we moved into a new season of the Shonen Jump Championships. September would see Shonen Jump Washington be taken by Jonathan LaBounty, with the new Monarch variant known as Perfect Circle. The name Perfect Circle referred to how the build would constantly loop cards back to the top of the opponent's deck using the effects of Raiza the Storm Monarch and Felix Ringed Wind Blast. Add a little bit of Crush card to the equation, and you had a deck that was impossible to fight back against once it got going. Fortunately for many, this side of the year would not see the same level of Monarch dominance as we had seen before the World Championships. October would see Philip Anthony's zombie build take Shonen Jump Durham. The introduction of Zombie Master and Old Blood would be the key needed to finally unlock the full potential of Card of Safe Return. Zombie decks already utilised a strategy which revolved around reviving monsters from the graveyard. Zombie Master just put it on the next level. With 3 copies of Safe Return, you had a deck whose draw power was simply unmatched at the time. Continuing this trend of Monarchs not winning things was Louis Raimondo's Burn deck from Shonen Jump Chicago. This deck would take the burn strategy in a new direction, as the inclusion of double Dark Bribe and triple Skill Drain would essentially stop your opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Once the opponent had sided for the deck's 18 trap cards, it was time to bring out the Monarch strategy. It would appear that smoke screening was a very popular tactic back then. For those of you unfamiliar with that term, smoke screening is the act of combining your side deck and main deck together and then taking out the 15 cards you don't want to use. That way, your opponent has no reference to what it is you're actually siding. You could be siding counter cards, you could be siding an entire new strategy, or you could just be playing mind games with them and siding nothing at all. One thing's for sure, it worked a treat in Chicago. 2007 would close off with a return to form, as the Monarchs would strike back with a new variation simply known as Circle. This 45 card beast would be made to heavily support Light and Darkness Dragon, as the deck's pirate would aim to get it on the field as quickly as possible. The inclusion of the Destiny Hero engine alongside the newly released Foolish Burial made this one hell of a fast deck. Considering Monarch's reputation as a control deck, the speed of this thing must have took a lot of people by surprise. So that's it for 2007, a crazy year which saw the game take huge strides away from the chaos strategies that had dominated in the past. Monarch decks may have controlled the meta a little too much, but considering what Airblade Turbo was capable of, things could have been much worse. Join us next time as we look back on what was Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest and most controversial change to date. See ya.